Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind, we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that.
U.S. President Donald Trump just minutes ago from just outside the White House in the Rose Garden there announcing his long-promised reciprocal tariffs on what he termed Liberation Day. And there are a lot of tariffs that apply to many other countries around the world, but Canada at this point looks to be largely emerging unscathed. And I say that because we are not on the lists that the White House produced of other countries and what the tariff that they would be subjected to. Neither is Mexico. And there are multiple reports at this hour, and we are efforting to confirm it ourselves at the White House, that even a 10% baseline tariff that Donald Trump announced tonight, reciprocal in nature, as he characterized it, would not apply to goods that are covered by the new NAFTA or the USMCA, as it's being termed, which would largely, mean that much of what we trade with the United States would not be subject to that 10% tariff. To try and figure out the overall economic impact of what we just heard and sort of look ahead to what might come, Stephen Poloz is back with me. He's a former Bank of Canada governor and current special advisor at Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt. Hello again. Thank you for listening to all of that and trying to help us make sense of it. Are you at all as surprised as maybe I felt? I think we were bracing for what appeared to be much worse. It doesn't sound like the worst case scenario, at least for Canada.
At least for Canada. What I appreciate is that there seems to be a degree of respect for USMCA. Been ignored throughout the 25% on steel, aluminum, and of course autos, which was reinforced again today. But the rest, for that comment we received from the Prime Minister after his phone call, which is, yes, after the election, whoever is in government, there would be a fulsome conversation, a negotiation around not just trade, but our security arrangements with the United States, a whole new package. And that seems to have been the substance of that conversation. So this leaves it there in that, someday in the future. But getting back to what it means for the world.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, because those are some hugely significant tariffs on the EU, on China, on Japan, on Taiwan. My goodness.
Yeah, so, this is truly a big stagflationary shock for the world.
And what does that mean in layman's terms?
We always said it would be stagflationary. That means it would raise prices, inflation, probably, at the same time as it slowed economic growth. That's, from the 1970s, the term stagflation. And in some countries that are harder hit, you might expect more stag than inflation, such as Canada, a very trade-dependent country, whereas maybe our inflationary parts would come mostly from whatever retaliatory tariffs that we use. Whereas in the U.S., it would be mostly inflation and maybe not much stag. But even already, the investment and housing and so on have already slowed quite significantly in the United States. So there's even talk about recession indicators flashing red in the United States already. So perhaps the president won't be satisfied with his initiative until he has created the greatest recession ever, or something like that from a global standpoint. During his presentation, he talked about how tariffs were in place after, up to World War I. And then we invented the income tax. And he suggested that that's where the Great Depression came from. And they tried to put tariffs back in place during the early part of the Great Depression, but it was too late to avoid the Great Depression. Such an inversion of economic history. I've never seen anything like it.
Fact check it if you could.
I guess.
And when it comes to, the other indication that he clearly made tonight, that he has previously, is the view that, when he talked about, for example, income tax, that he doesn't think that should be the means of raising revenue, that these tariffs will be a means of raising revenue. But my goodness, at what cost?
Well, they really will. I mean, even if they get negotiated down or there's responses from various countries to, in effect, invert reciprocity, I guess is the word I want, maybe lower some of their tariff barriers, and that would maybe give a lower tariff in the United States. Perhaps that's the kind of process that would be envisioned. But even so, in the end, there will be a lot of revenue coming from some of these tariffs. And ask what would be the response. Let's say, you know, if you've bought a Barbie doll for one of your kids, I just looked on Amazon. I wasn't sure how much they cost. They cost $12, $15, $20. Is China then going to reshore Barbie doll production to the United States instead of making them in China and shipping them? I don't think so. And a 34% tariff, I think it was, for China would make a Barbie doll $15 or $16 or $25 for the deluxe one. I don't think that's going to change anything, except to cause inflation in the United States.
And what do you think the chances, and I obviously know that there's a lot of mitigating factors, but what are the chances a recession does hit the United States?
Well, I'd say they're pretty high because that's, you know, it's literally not inflation is when prices go up if the economy is slowing down. And what it does is it contracts the amount of spending power that consumers have. And they've already been working through a very tough cost of living shock from the post-pandemic period. So I think this will only reinforce that feeling of angst down in the bottom part of the U.S. economy. The so-called waves of investment that will come to the United States, I understand all that, but that is not going to change the consumer, you know, right away. We may have to go through a U.S. recession, and of course, many countries, perhaps the world, will have a recession.
And what about Canada, given how interdependent we remain, despite all of the conversations we're having?
Well,
otherwise?
you know, it's too early to make calls like that, but I would say probably. It would be hard to avoid if there is a global recession. But I think if we focus on finding ways to make it appropriate for companies to invest to the future in this slowdown period instead of waiting out, then we have a chance of creating a buffer on that downside.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you very much, Mr. Poloz. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
Stephen Poloz was the governor of the Bank of Canada.